Be aware how, when, and with whom. So that's quite important. So our talk is the art of questioning, communication in class. Communication in class is necessary. We demand too much on the students. Students have to work. But how can we ask students to do it? Through a question. That question has to be meaningful, has to have a purpose. All right? So, our main purpose for this talk today, now, we will find out how to use the questions, how to use the wait time in class, especially whenever we ask a question. Also, how can we get students involved in a class through the right questioning? And also, what types of questions can we use in a real class? So that's the most important. Many times we just ask a question. Hey, we just drop a question. The students get it many times, but many times they don't get it. So that's the time whenever the wait time is important, people. So let's start working. So, quick question. Okay, what kind of skills do you think we need in order to develop our questioning? One answer, come on. Interaction, speaking of communication. So what do you believe is necessary for us to know whenever we question? What skill? Listening. So if I don't have that skill, it's going to be impossible for me to transmit the message. Do your questions have a specific goal? How many times we just ask a question to get the student's attention? So we get the attention, but does this one have a purpose? Yes? So that's quite important, people. Do you believe a question is a potent teaching tool?
Yes.
Yes. How do we start communicating? Through a question. So that question has to be meaningful. All right? Next one. I love this one. Listen, this one is mentioned, well, this author is cited by Ralph in a book I have. It's about teaching science. It's wonderful. I'm sure that Laura remembers that one. Can you see, people? Take a look at this one. Is it true that, the 30% of questioning in class is employed, according to that quote? Listen, 30% focused on analysis, synthesis. So that's what they said in 1988. So what's going on right now? Yes? And also what they said, the 70% of our questioning tended to be focused on knowledge and comprehension. So how many times we actually focus on those percentages? Is it true? So how many times we just challenge the students about certain pieces of knowledge? So that's what happens most of the time. But nowadays, the tendency is different. Now, since we're talking about how to center students' attention and how to center our attention, especially on what they need to develop, so that percentage has been changing through the time. What do you believe the percentage might be nowadays? Could be the opposite now? Could be the 70% nowadays? I would say so. Might be, might not. Since we want to focus and make the students develop, there's different levels of thinking, analysis, application, synthesis. So nowadays the students get the control. People move on this side. Come on, join us. So in those cases, nowadays we try to give the students the control of many activities in class under our own guidance. So that's quite important. All right? Another point. Check this out. How can we impact our students through the questioning? Listening. Our questioning must have a kind of sequence. From something easy to something much more complex. So that goes, it has a progress. So the progress depends a lot on what kind of students we've got. So the students we've got, so it's the type of question I'm going to use. How many times we just drop a question that is quite hard and many people just stay quiet. So those are biggest problems. So that's why communication never happens. How many times it's so frustrating for us We just ask the question and nobody answers. Isn't it amazing? So that means we need to prepare ourselves to be much more aware on what's going on. Hey, Oscar, I prepare my classes wonderfully. What happens? Nobody answers. What's the biggest problem? Check the way how you speak. Check the way how you formulate the questions. So that comes from the very beginning of the class, let's say from the very beginning of the course. So that's quite important, people. Next one. How can teachers use questions? So that's important, listen. What do we want them for? So to wake up their interest, to make a kind of diagnosis on how, or what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, okay? Also, I like the number 3 people, just like I said. So you've got the sequence. You start, working on their own basic level thinking, and then you start going, upwards. The harder the better many times. But that one has to have a specific sequence. Be careful. Also, to find out how much they know from the previous knowledge. So, as long as we know what type of question I'm using, the student is going to start progressing on his learning or her learning. So we have to know, what kind of impact my question is making in that moment. Can you see? So that's one for reflection, people. So this one. So my questioning in this very moment. Now tell me, personally, are you getting the point? Everyone is sleeping, yes. Yes, I sound like a father to the children, right? This moment is like, listen, every single question, people, actually affects a lot, believe it or not, on what? On their own achievement, on their thinking, and their attitudes. Believe it or not, but the kids, the students are like a little sponge of emotions. So whatever the question, even though you may say, Oscar, this is a stupid question, there is no stupid question in class. Yes? So there is no a foolish one, no way. So that's what we think all the time. Now when we ask this simple question, no, even though it is simple, it is meaningful. Why? Because some students may get it and say, oh, I understand. That question might be full for that student, but for the other kids are not. Yes? So those aspects are quite important. Psychology is on all the time. So emotions have to be up all the time. So, take a look at this. Once we ask, students get into an attitude. Students start developing their own attitudes. Towards whom? The teacher, the same classmates, the people around. Okay? So, what do? You ask them the question. They start participating, thinking, but at the same time, they're going to be accomplishing things. So what's the most important for them? To accomplish something meaningful, something they actually want to use outside of the classroom. So, I still remember some time ago, early 90s, I know I'm way older than you are guys, I know, but I still remember my students, whenever I used to teach them at the very beginning, I have tried to make my classes as communicative as I can. A little bit informal sometimes because you have to break the ice. I know, I go through metalinguistic terminology, but at the same time, I try to make it as familiar to them as I can. I still remember one of those negative, let's say, experiences. One student came up to me some time ago, a few years ago. He came to me and he said to me, Oscar, I thought I had not learned anything in your class, Oscar, until I went to the United States. And I said, well, no problem. No one learns. Everything with me and for me. But he said, no, Oscar, I just came over to offer an apology. I said, what did I do? So he said, oh my God, did I call you something wrong? What did I do? No, Oscar, I thought, I told my parents, no, I learned nothing from Oscar. Oscar was just blah, blah, blah. Everyone was blah, 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 blah. And I never noticed I had actually learned. And then until the moment I went to the United States, Oscar, I put into practice what you taught me. I said, okay, what did I teach you? Long time ago. And he said, no, Oscar, I mean, actually I learned all those expressions that you taught us, Oscar, they were really, really useful to me in that very moment. And he said, Oscar, my apologies. And I said, well, I have nothing to apologize. Like, I'm a simple human being. And he said, no, but why should I forgive you something I don't actually remember? And he said, no, Oscar, because I gave you a bad name. I said, oh, no problem. We're down the road. We're just learning to. No, Oscar, just because of that. That's okay. So, was it meaningful to you? Yes, Oscar. I learned how to communicate, and I said, thank God. At least I did something like this good in my life. So that was very, fulfilling at the end. So I have realized that I have been doing things, and I do believe that many times I make mistakes, but at the same time they are meaningful. So those mistakes are meaningful. And you see? So why? Why a mistake is important? Because you make the students reflect. Unbelievably, but many times students don't understand. They believe that, no, Oscar, it's so hard to understand. I don't want to talk in class, Oscar, because I feel so shy. I feel no confidence. To me, making mistakes is a humongous barrier to communicate. Come on, kid. Come up. Tell us ideas. Tell us how to formulate things. Tell us, come on. So they do it. But that's one of the biggest problems that we face in class, personality. Personality is one of the most important ones. Check this out. Students must develop positive attitudes toward higher level questioning if instructional approaches such as inquiry are to be effective. That was cited by William in Ralph Martin book. So isn't it amazing? So we're dealing with attitudes all the time. All of you right now, you are sitting right now, you're listening to me, and you're just thinking, uh-oh, I did ask a question like that, and nobody understood in my class. Now I'm wondering why. And you see? So those are the aspects we need to focus. How do teachers use questions to involve all the students? That's quite important. Listen, in Ralph's book, he says, wait in 3 seconds. Do you actually wait for 3 seconds? No, Oscar, 2 seconds, Oscar, I kill them. 2 seconds is enough for me, Oscar. No way. No, we need to know to whom we're talking. So we have to know how to manage that time. If the student requires more time, give it to him or to her. Don't be nasty. Oscar, but I'm the one, I'm the star. Forget about it. Okay? So those are aspects we need to think about. Also, through this, listen, students' confidence is something we're looking forward all the time. All right? Students ask more questions, and look at the last one, discipline. So, isn't it funny whenever you see people, having a quarrel, whatever, fighting against them, or talking to each other, not paying attention to the teacher. So most of the time, one question stops everything. Yeah. Students get into discipline. So, okay, Carlitos, you do the homework. Yes, mister. Okay, there you go. So, Marianita, okay, have you written the assignment I told you about? Oh, yeah. So they go back to their place, so they pay attention. Can you see how powerful a question is? Now, the types of questions. Right here, Martin mentions 4 types of questions. The memory ones, the first one, the convergent questions, divergent questions, and evaluative thinking questions. Memory, as we know, how to learn to memorize things, lists. That's what we do all the time, formulas, etc., etc. Convergent ones, they imply knowledge at the same time, but also on those ones is whenever you give an exact and correct answer. Okay? Divergent ones, those ones are for stimulation for the students. Those ones are for the risk takers. Let me give you one example. Okay, who can give me the answer? What's a paperclip? Give me one answer. Paperclip. I feel like a class, everyone trembling, Just give us one simple answer. What's a paperclip?
It's a metal.
Okay, to hold paper.
It's an item that you use to get papers together.
Okay, to get the papers together. Any other?
A picture from a newspaper or a magazine or something like that.
Okay. Any other? It's a good one. We're speaking about this little, tool for the papers. So I have the paperclip specific. So for holding papers together, any other answer?
Metal thing.
Excuse me?
A metal thing
Okay.
made of metal.
Okay.
A device used to organize information.
Okay, there we go. Any other? My God, that's a wonderful answer too. Any other extra use that you have for a paperclip? Okay, to open the door. Okay, for the Christmas balls and the Christmas trees. Okay, now listen. Tell me, what kind of answer is that? Is that for a convergent thinker or for a divergent thinker? Okay, the one who thought about opening up the doors, yes, for hanging those Christmas ornaments on the Christmas tree. That's a divergent thinker.